December 8th, 2004. The entire metal community fell silent. Fans crowded a modest arena in Columbus, Ohio. The story came to an end when a gunshot pierced the darkness as the music was still blaring from the speakers. The audience was shocked when Dimebag Darrell Pantera's soul and a guitar master collapsed into the stage beneath the lights. He did not fade away in old age or behind the wall of fame. He was killed while performing live music, which was his greatest passion. Others were harmed in addition to a great artist being brutally murdered in front of hundreds of people. Many questions remain unanswered by this point. In reality, who killed them? Is this a lone lunatic or a component of a larger scheme? Dimebag is there, but why? With him, what did they want? Long before he was injured in a catastrophe, however, Dimebag Darrell was the embodiment of raw metal force. Any riff could be transformed by him into a razor that sliced through melancholy. In the midst of mayhem, he was a joyful force, and death couldn't silence him since his soul was so full of passion for music. What caused a Texas youngster who was obsessed with guitars to rise to the top of the metal scene only to collapse and become a legend? To understand why Dimebag Darrell was more than simply a guitarist, let's take a look back into his brief but flaming existence. He represented an entire era. His spirit may still be heard someplace, screaming, burning, and never calm, that shouted guitar sound. Early years before his guitar playing made him renowned, Darrell Lance Abbott was raised in Arlington, Texas, and was only a young child with red hair. He was born in his little southern hamlet on August 20th, 1966. It was more than a dream to sing. Every day, he breathed that air. His father, Jerry Abbott, was a country music artist and sound engineer. The sounds of impassioned vocals, claps, and guitar strings filled Darrell's early years. From an early age, they were always there in the backdrop of his every move. Despite their lack of wealth, the Abbott family was very close and had a lot of musical connections. In that context, Darrell's relationship with his older brother, Vinnie Paul, who is 3 years older than him, was stronger than blood. Darrell loved the guitar, but Vinnie preferred the drums and beat. He first admired rock guitarists like Ace Frehley of Kiss, Tony Iommi, and Black Sabbath's. However, everything changed after he heard Eddie Van Halen. He wanted to do more than just play the guitar. He intended to demolish it, disobey all regulations, and use fire to reconstruct it. Darrell never took formal guitar lessons, which is odd. By ear and sensation, he taught himself all he knew about chords, bends, and tremolo. He could play like the greatest guitarist before he was 13, and even better, he could create his own sound. At the age of 15, Darrell participated in his first guitar tournament. He often prevailed in it. Every time he performed at Eye in the End, people were enthralled by the potent and alluring sound of his cherished Dean ML guitar. He was so powerful that organizers had to cease allowing anyone else to compete. They made him a judge, even though he wasn't old enough to consume beer. Darrell and Finney co-founded Pantera when Darrell was just 16. Despite not having attended school or been signed to a record label, they possessed a talent that cannot be taught in a classroom. An unshakable friendship and raw rock and roll fire. A guitarist and drummer performing together was a unique musical duo. Their voices had a same language, and their hearts beat in perfect unison. Dimebag Darrell's early years were not depressing or impoverished. Rather, it was full of commitment, affection, and a unique type of determination. When you watch a teenager play guitar until he faints from exhaustion and then smiles after the final riff, you know that a genius has just begun to emerge and the world has no idea what will happen next. Panda got its start in the early 1980s in a little garage in Texas. The band was founded by the Abbott brothers and a few close pals. At the time, Dimebag was still known as Diamond Darrell. As an adolescent musician, he already possessed extremely sophisticated abilities. They lacked a professional studio and media attention. All they had was a dream that glistened in their minds, a fierce brotherly relationship, and scorching guitar playing. Panda's early outfits were modeled after bands like Mötley Crüe and Rat, who were well known in the glam metal scene thanks to their gaudy appearance, tight leather trousers, and untidy hair. This was a sound Dimebag was accustomed to. He performed lightning-fast solos and wore shirts with fringe. Their early documents bear his mark. I Am the Night, 1985, Metal Magic, 1983, and Projects in the Jungle, 1984. But if you listen carefully, you may hear something different. A louder, harsher riff approach that suggests a sound poised to transcend the superficial glam mold. When Pantera changed lead singers in 1987, everything changed. Phil Anselmo became the band's lead vocalist. He has a lot of energy, a restless streak, and a growling voice. At that moment, refined love melodies gave way to angry tantrums, irate teenagers, and the defiant cries of a lost generation. The guitar was no longer a showpiece after Dimebag picked it up. They utilized it as a tool to pierce the surface and create their own sound. In 1988, Pantera released Power Metal. It was a transitional album with aspects of glam that were still present but were beginning to fade, revealing a more aggressive, coarser tone. With razor-sharp riffs, cutting rhythms, and solos that accomplished more than just showcasing his talent, Dimebag began to establish his own style. They targeted the listener's senses and thinking. However, major record labels continued to overlook Pantera despite their highly talented players and formidable roster. They were perceived by many as a half-baked glam band that lacked the wildness and popularity to truly shine. Dimebag didn't hold off until everyone was prepared. From smoky clubs to dusty local fairs, he continued to record, practice until his fingers ached, and perform on any small stage they could find. He tested the limits of both the band and himself. Career breakthrough. After nearly 10 years of silence, Pantera released Cowboys from Hell in 1990. It was a powerful declaration that they were prepared to alter the metal genre. Glam was no longer present. The gaudy exterior was gone. It was replaced with hard drum rhythms, fine riffs, and the fierce, unyielding growl of Phil Anselmo. The quiet amid the storm was Dimebag Darrell. He transformed the stage into a battlefield and his guitar into a weapon by playing it as though each note were a shot at reality. The music was recorded at Pantera Sound Studio, owned by Dimebag's father. It was essentially the band's home. There, they slept, ate, and recorded sounds that could be heard all night long using beer cans. With songs like Cowboys from Hell, Cemetery Gates, and Domination, Pantera rose to fame in the metal community. The music was both sweet and gritty, and they immersed everyone in Dimebag's creative universe. 2 years later, in 1992, Pantera delivered a crass exhibition of strength that many consider to be the groove metal credo. With Walk, Dimebag created one of the most straightforward and powerful riffs in metal history. Even though there are just 4 notes, they have a strong emotional impact. However, his solo turned unexpectedly delicate and agonizing in this love. Listeners were taken aback by the abrupt shift from rage to genuine emotion. He demonstrated that playing a metal guitar wasn't limited to yelling. You may cry with it as well. During its initial week of release in 1994, Far Beyond Driven violated every guideline. When it peaked at #1 on the Billboard 200, it was the biggest album in U.S. history. Dimebag made rough metal the most popular genre during a period when grunge was dominant. He demonstrated his ability to transform rage into organized rhythmic force in songs like I'm Broken, Becoming, and 5 Minutes Alone. Every riff resembled a hot and tempered piece of steel, yet the sun always cast shadows. When Phil Anselmo recorded the vocals for the Great Southern Trendkill in 1996 in his own studio in Louisiana, away from the Abbott brothers both physically and psychologically, Pantera was starting to disintegrate. The relationship was becoming chilly. Rather of attempting to defuse the situation, Dimebag poured all of his emotions into the guitar. He used tremolo to create harmonic squeals that resembled pleas for assistance. And one of his most potent pieces ended up being Floods, with its lengthy, ominous solo. Reimagining the Steel, Pantera's final album, was released in February. Pantera was no longer a single force at that point, but it was an attempt to return to their roots and reclaim the metal from metalhead spirit. However, Dimebag and Vinny felt as though they were bearing the burden of a shattered past, while Anselmo was preoccupied with other projects. In February 2003, Pantera disbanded in secret following September 11th and years of unresolved war. There was no farewell or final performance. Where there had once been joyful recollections, now was only a chilly silence. Dimebag was inconsolable. Pantera was his heart, as everyone who knew him well understood. It was no longer beating. In a brief exchange, he simply stated, "I put my heart into Pantera." One day it vanished. N01 raised his voice. "There were just me and my guitar." After months of introspection, Dimebag and Vinny came up with Damage Plan. It marked the beginning of a fresh era and a hopeful rebirth. I didn't intend for it to go on. From then on, there was no turning back. The well-known band Pantera that appeared on magazine covers has vanished. Rather, like in the early days at Panago Sound, they were just two brothers knocking on studio doors with a guitar, a drum gear, and their pride. They seemed to care about every beat and riff. Above all, they performed as though the audience was still present, listening, and in need of them. The fact that Neuf Found Power 2004 didn't take off as planned didn't matter to Dimebag. All he wanted was to be on stage, grinning broadly, and playing each note as if it were his last, which it was. Nobody could have predicted that the tour, during which he gave his all for a select group of devoted followers, would conclude with a bullet that killed a hero. Dimebag played as though tomorrow didn't exist, and in reality, it didn't. When Dimebag Darrell was performing, life in general was like a rainstorm. Electric, wild, and unstoppable. In the background, he was a man who cherished his brother, music, and the woman he considered his entire universe. He was loyal and hilarious, too. Dimebag's high school sweetheart, Rita Haney, was his wife for nearly 2 decades. It's not marriage or formality, but a tie that is stronger and endures longer than most vows. Rita was not merely his girl at all. She was Dimebag's genuine love, his backstage boss, and someone who witnessed all of his joys and sorrows. Together, they experienced hardships as children, shared a basement while Pantera was still a concept, and traveled throughout America on every tour bus. Despite his reputation for being crazy, partying, and living like a rock star, Dimebag never crossed Rita. According to friends, he never missed a nighttime call home and always carried a photo of her. In interviews, when asked about love, Dimebag would simply smile and respond, "I found the right one early. Why look elsewhere?" His brother Vinnie Paul and Dimebag's unbreakable friendship played a significant role in his day-to-day existence. They were not merely band members. They also provided mental support to one another. When the other fell, one scooped him up. One became irate, but the other calmed him down. They experienced Pantera's breakup grief, had similar ambitions, and returned stronger with a Damage Plan. They did it because they needed each other and music to survive in order to support his friends and other artists, not because they wanted to be famous. Dimebag was not a legendary character. He always had a video camera with him so he could capture hilarious moments on tour and insane moments backstage. He was renowned for greeting everyone he encountered with bottles of whiskey and giving them a tight hug as if they were long-lost relatives. Dimebag believed that there was more to music than just sounds. It was about laughing, getting to know one another, sharing a drink, and giving each other a strong hug. But when he passed away, the metal community wept as they had lost a brother for that reason. Dimebag was more than just a musician, after all. Despite never having met him, you always felt a connection to him. And the same thing is said by everyone who has visited Dimebag Darrell's universe, even if only once. He gave you the impression that you were significant even when you weren't. The unsolved puzzles and the startling death. Dimebag Darrell was a crazy, heavy-riffing guitarist. In reality, though, he was a man with a large number of close friends and relatives. Despite playing powerful music, he had a gentle, compassionate soul. He loved with all of his heart and gave his all for his friends. Perhaps, however, his death was so sudden, brutal, and senseless that everyone was shocked since his heart was always open, unguarded, and without walls. Dimebag performed with his new band, Damage Plan, at Columbus, Ohio's El Rosa Villa Bar on December 8, 2004. He was seen by about 250 individuals. The guitar was ringing even though he had only just begun to play when a tall man wearing a gray sweatshirt leaped over the barrier, drew his gun, and shot Dimebag in the head. In front of hundreds of stunned fans, his bandmates, and brother Vinnie Paul, he fainted. Before cops put him down, the gunman continued to shoot and killed 3 more people. But for Dimebag, it was too late. It was more than simply a catastrophe when he passed away on stage at the age of 38, surrounded by blood and music. The whole music industry was rocked by Dimebag's passing. Around the world, fans questioned why him? A guitarist who was always kind, helpful, and had no enemies or difficulties was brutally murdered. The grief persisted in the days that followed. Rather, it worsened and many questions arose that no one could readily address. The killer was identified as 25-year-old Nathan Gale, a former Marine with schizophrenia. According to those who knew him well, he frequently said that Dimebag should compensate Pantera for stealing his songs. However, what truly frightened individuals was how meticulously and methodically Gale performed the act. It appeared so organized and simple. He was not searched when he entered the club armed. It wasn't secure. No one was there to stop him, and there were no metal scanners. His blow didn't appear to be unexpected. Like an execution, it was swift, premeditated, and brutal. As with the death of a legend, the ideas began to circulate. Gale wasn't acting alone, according to others. They believed that the persistent issues between Dimebag and Phil Anselmo, the former Pantera lead vocalist, were what drove him. Additionally, Selmo had advised the media that Dimebag should be struck in the face. Vinny and the rest of the Abbott family never forgiven Anelmo for his words. He eventually apologized and claimed that his words had no malicious intent, yet they never spoke to one another again in their entire lives. There was stone-like anguish between them. Others continued to believe in even more bizarre and sinister conspiracy theories, claiming that Gale had been informed during his military service that Dimebag's death was a part of a larger, untouchable scheme. Although there was no concrete evidence, no one could be certain that it was the random behavior of a crazy person either. Dimebag's funeral was seen in the music community as a royal farewell. Thousands of individuals, both well-known people and unidentified admirers, came to pay tribute to the individual. To carry the torch, Eddie Van Halen brought the original Bumblebee guitar, the one used on Van Halen 2, and placed it in Dimebag's coffin. "I should be the one to take this guitar to the grave," he said to Dimebag. His gravestone has just 2 words written on it: "Drag you." Dimebag's trademark was the line he used each time he lifted a glass, chuckled, or took the stage. It wasn't a theory. It was a lifestyle. Live your life loudly and treat everyone with kindness. They could never destroy his spirit, even though they had taken his body. There's no more badass Darrell. But in every heart that still aches, his guitar is still crying to be heard. And 20 years later, in a community that still laments the man who performed as if there were no tomorrow and actually had none. Music style and history. Dimebag Darrell gave metal guitar its own vocabulary, despite not being the one who invented it. There was no need to translate that sentence. All it had to do was be sensed. He took a new approach to get to the core of the issue at a time when artists were attempting to showcase their technical prowess. With squeals that howled like souls in agony and riffs as weighty as sledgehammers, he made the guitar speak. Dimebag made the guitar talk, not just play it. He was an expert in fusing different styles. Rock music encompasses a wide range of styles, including blues, funk, and metal. He could play fast, but only in critical situations. The simple beat that made you nod your head, even if you didn't understand the lyrics, was what he was most interested in. For Dimebag, tricks were merely a tool. To feel something was the aim. The Dean ML was one of his covert instruments. The sound was loud and piercing, and the guitar sounded hefty. He made the guitar an icon by playing Dean from the start of his career. Every Dimebag signature model was revered by fans as a sacred artifact. He was also well known for his Digitech whammy pedal, noise gates, and dive bombs, even after briefly switching to Washburn and then returning to Dean. People felt as though they were yelling through the commotion out of instinct thanks to these sound effects. Dimebag, despite his rebellious appearance, always had a musical soul. He claimed that his mood swings and note releases were greatly influenced by Tony Iommi, Eddie Van Halen, Ace Frehley, and most notably, Billy Gibbons of ZZ Top. This explains why songs like Love, Cemetery Gates, and Floods continue to bring people to tears. Dimebag's legacy endures beyond Pantera's well-known albums, such as Cowboys from Hell and Vulgar Show of Power Beyond Driven. His technique has served as an inspiration to thousands of young guitarists who have used it to find their own voice. Today, bands like Machine Head, Trivium, and Lamb of God Avenged Sevenfold look up to Dimebag. He altered history in a way that even his detractors could not deny. He was repeatedly called one of the greatest players of all time by Guitar World. He was listed by Gibson as one of the 10 most significant metal guitarists in history. The Rolling Stone once ranked him as low as number 92, which some admirers didn't enjoy. Metal fans have long considered Dimebag to be the best. Not because of the accolades or prizes, though. The way he endures in his fans' hearts is what counts most. Instead of being summoned by name, Dimebag is called to the stage by sound. One thing remains constant in the metal world whenever someone plays a Dean guitar or Walker Dominations riff. Not everyone remembers Dimebag Darrell. Millions of people play him again every day. Although there are no statues of him, many people lift their arms in response to his riffs. A whole generation is still depressed despite the lack of a national day of grief. There's always a peaceful place where people call his name with all their hearts, even when it's really loud. The everlasting brother of power and eternal life is Dimebag. Dimebag Darrell no longer roars over loud noises when standing on stage. However, in an odd sense, the moment he hit the ground, his presence intensified. The hearts of those who were left behind, not live performances. His death did not make him famous. His life was a constant joke, so others heard about him. Every year since the tragedy in 2004, Dimebag has been honored by metal fans worldwide. These performances have varied from large gatherings with thousands of spectators to intimate pub performances with only a few dozen. Zakk Wylde, Rob Flynn, Kerry King, Corey Taylor, and Dave Grohl are a few musicians who have performed Pantera songs in his honor. Not for fame or fortune, but because they have a particular place in their hearts for Dimebag. Many musicians consider Dimebag to be the silent leader of their lives. Without Pantera and Dimebag, metal would not be where it is today, according to contemporary metal bands Lamb of God, Trivia, Mastodon, and Bullet for My Valentine. In their opinion, his technique wasn't always the finest among musicians. The ability to kindle a fire is the one skill that cannot be taught in a classroom. Not him. Because Dimebag lived like a real brother rather than a celebrity, people will never forget him. He was always the same as everyone else with whom he stood. He never concealed his methods, and he never made himself unreachable by becoming well-known. It was possible to find Dimebag in the bar behind a concert. He would always welcome you with a bottle of whiskey, a smile, and an embrace. And if you were fortunate, they would teach you how to play the riff at that same moment. For years, millions of players have been unable to purchase Dean ML guitars bearing his name. From amps to pedals to strings, every Dimebag trademark item is sacred, and each of those guitars has more than just sound. Their approach is fierce, kind, and entirely focused on pure music. Following Vinnie Paul's passing in February 2018, metalheads worldwide began referring to the brothers as the immortal twins of groove metal. One of the most exquisite chapters in the history of heavy music was written by these two individuals. In heaven, Dime and Vinny are reportedly raising a get-a-pole together as if death had never occurred. Dimebag's influence cannot be determined by the number of records he sells or the accolades he receives. Every time a stranger plays a Pantera riff or a teen hears that first screaming squeal and believes it's me, it's measured by the echo of his existence. He is not sustained by his music. Thanks to Dimebag, music is still available. That is something that no one can ever take away. Before he passed away, there was no story about Dimebag Darrell. His death made him an icon. As a red-haired boy in a garage in Texas, he lived up to the legends. He kept his guitar in his hand. He occasionally sang songs by himself that only his heart could hear, and his riffs would later rock stages all over the world. Even though his life was brief and difficult, every action he took had an impact. The footsteps of a man who genuinely loved, lived, and wrote music. The rarest of all things, Dimebag clung to himself. In a society where people can be eaten alive by cameras, perhaps the greatest song he ever left behind was that one. He departed from us at the most exquisite moment. His hand was still on the neck, and his smile was still there as the guitar began to sing. No one wanted it to occur. However, he might have chosen to pass away in that manner while performing live, surrounded by affection. Even though Darrell is now quiet, he is still present in every song you play, every tear you shed, and every head that bangs to the beat of the walk, stronger and more eternal than ever. How do you feel about the voyage of Dimebag Darrell? Fill in the area here with your ideas, anecdotes, or simply just a memorial. Remember to hit like and subscribe if you'd like to know more about the lives of the celebrities who made a lasting impression. There will always be music. Darrell never actually went to the Dimebag.